Welcome to Night Stories from VHS Era. You've arrived at a place where the glow of old television screens, the hum of rewinding tapes, and the softness of forgotten childhood dreams come alive once more. Each night will take a quiet journey back in time to sleepy suburbs, moonlit driveways, warm summer breezes, and the kind of memories that feel just a little too magical to be real. Here you don't need to worry. Just press play and let the night unfold. Before we begin tonight's story, let's take a moment to slow down. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath in through your nose. Hold it gently. And now, exhale slowly through your mouth. Let the day melt away with that breath. Again, breathe in deeply. Feel your shoulders soften. Now, release and let go of everything you don't need to carry right now. Imagine you're lying on a cozy bed in your childhood room. Outside, the wind hums softly. The light from a small lamp glows like a warm memory, and the sound of a distant VHS tape spinning fills the air with comfort. You are safe. You are still. And the night is yours. Let's begin tonight's story.
Welcome to Night Stories from VHS Era. Have you ever stood in front of a mirror, heart racing, rehearsing words that felt heavier than the world itself? Do you remember what it felt like to fall in love without the safety net of emojis or text bubbles? To speak with your eyes, to risk everything in a moment of silence that could either shatter or save your heart? Tonight, let's go back to that time, the 90s. The decade of cassette tapes, neon windbreakers, and the magic of not knowing what would happen after you said "I love you" out loud for the very first time. Stay with me until the end of this video and you'll remember, or discover, what it truly meant to say those words before we all started hiding behind screens. By the end of this story, you'll understand why we were afraid, why we hoped, and why it mattered so deeply to get it right. It was the spring of 1996, back when my bedroom walls were covered in posters from Bop and Tiger Beat, and the smell of CK1 clung to my hoodie like a promise I didn't yet understand. I was 17, that age when you think you're invincible, but your chest still tightens at the smallest things. A glance, a smile, the sound of her laugh from down the hallway. Her name was Emma. She wore her hair in braids that looked like they belonged to a summer I hadn't lived yet. We weren't officially dating. That wasn't how it worked back then. You talked. You passed notes folded into squares that had your hearts inside. And you waited. Waited for that one right moment. But how do you know when that moment comes? And more than that, how do you say those 3 words without a blinking heart emoji to soften the blow? Without the protection of a ha-ha at the end? I practiced them everywhere, whispered them to my reflection while brushing my teeth. I love you. Again. Softer. I love you. Louder. I love you. In the shower, where the water disguised the trembling in my voice, under my breath at night, lying on my twin bed covered with my worn Goosebumps blanket, staring up at glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling that I arranged to look like Orion. I said it like a prayer, like a wish I wasn't sure I deserved. Do you remember that kind of rehearsal? The kind you do with your whole body, your whole being, as if each time you say the words they might become easier to speak? Emma and I had this place we'd go after, school. A little corner behind the local Blockbuster where the bricks were warm from the sun and no one really went unless they were skipping class or chasing the quiet. We'd sit there, sharing a bag of Doritos and a can of Surge, talking about everything and nothing. I remember one Thursday, I had planned it all. I wore my best flannel. The green one she said made my eyes look like sea glass. I sprayed too much cool water cologne and stole one of my mom's mints before I left the house. I remember thinking, this is the day, and still, I couldn't say it. Do you remember that kind of fear? The kind that curls inside your chest and grips your throat just as you're about to be brave? I looked at her. The way her lips curved around the straw, the way her eyes squinted when she smiled at something I said, the way her fingers brushed, mine without thinking, and all I could do was smile back, because the words felt too big. They weren't ready, or maybe I wasn't. That night, I stood in front of the mirror again. I love you, I said. I love you. I tried every variation, light, serious, teasing, whispered, shouted into the silence of my room like some kind of exorcism. But nothing felt real unless I was saying it to her. Why was it so hard to speak what I felt? Was it fear of rejection? Fear of ruining the simplicity we had? Yes, all of that, and something more. In the 90s, love wasn't instant. It wasn't a heart sent in 2 seconds through an app. It was slow, messy, real. It was passing a mixtape with songs you hoped said what you couldn't. It was writing in your notebook during class, does she feel the same? And not knowing the answer for days or weeks. It was risk, and still, I kept practicing. Every night before bed, I'd close my eyes and picture it. Me, looking into her eyes, saying it, just saying it. I love you. I imagined her smile, the way her cheeks would turn pink, the way, maybe, just maybe, she'd say it back. It was hope. That's what it was. Hope with a heartbeat. Have you ever held on to hope like that? Like it was the last cassette in your Walkman and the tape was wearing thin, but the song meant everything? Did. And I wasn't ready to let it go. I hope you stay with me, because in the next chapter, I'll tell you what happened the day I finally did it. The moment I let go of fear and just said the words. Out loud. Face to face. Without emojis. Without edits. Just heart to heart, and I'll also tell you what she said after. Because that moment, well, it changed me. I didn't say the words out loud that day, but something inside me changed. Maybe it was the accumulation of all the silent rehearsals, the weight of everything I hadn't said. I walked home with my hands deep in my pockets, the sun already, dipping behind the rooftops, making the whole neighborhood look like it had been dipped in honey. The air smelled like laundry and distant barbecue, and the hum of the evening made everything feel slower, softer, kinder. That night, lying on my bed again beneath the same glowing stars, I made a new decision. If I couldn't say it to her, maybe I could write it. It was such a 90s thing, really, to pour your heart into a piece of lined notebook paper torn from your trapper keeper, to choose your pen carefully, your words even more so, to fold it not just once or twice, but into a perfect, thoughtful square, like a secret origami of feelings. I sat at my desk, the one wedged between my bookshelf and the corner where my Sony stereo blasted mixtapes, and I opened my drawer. Inside were pens, highlighters, a few stale airheads, and the small notepad I used only for important things. It wasn't decorated or special, just a stack of slightly yellowed pages, but it had history. I'd used it to write band names, doodle video game cheat codes, and now I was about to write something far more terrifying. I love you. 3 words. Still, they took up so much space inside me, it was hard to believe they only needed 10 letters. I held the pen above the paper for minutes. My hand hovered, then trembled, then lowered. I wrote her name first, in the corner, like a whisper. Emma. It looked delicate there, the ink soft against the page. Then I paused. I didn't want to sound like someone I wasn't. I didn't want to be dramatic or poetic or anything other than honest. So I took a breath, thought about what I'd say if I could look her in the eyes without fear, and I wrote. I've been thinking about this for a long time. Every time we talk, every time you smile at me, it gets harder not to say it. But I guess I'm scared. I guess I don't know if it will change everything. Still, I need to tell you, I love you. That was it. No fancy metaphors, no jokes, no hedging. I read it over once, twice. I ran my finger along the paper as if tracing the path of my feelings. Then I folded it. Not quickly, not sloppily, carefully. I creased it in half, then again, until it became a tiny square that could fit in the palm of my hand. I smoothed each edge, pressed it flat. That note, so small, felt like it carried the weight of the universe. Have you ever held a note in your hand that meant more than anything on your phone ever could? Have you ever pressed a folded piece of paper to your chest like it was armor? I did that night. I slid the note into my backpack and tried to sleep, but it was like sleeping with fireworks under my pillow. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her opening the note. I saw her reading the words. I imagined her face. Would she smile? Would she be surprised? Would she cry? The next morning, I wore the same flannel again, the green one. I remember my mom asking why I looked so pale, and I just shook my head and mumbled something about a math quiz. But really, I was preparing for battle. A soft, quiet kind of battle, where the only weapon was honesty. At school, the hallways felt louder than usual. Lockers slammed, sneakers squeaked, laughter echoed. But it all sounded muffled to me, like I was underwater, like none of it mattered except what I was carrying in my pocket. I saw Emma near her locker, twirling the little keychain she always had on her bag, the one shaped like a sunflower. She looked up at me and smiled. "Hey," she said. "Hey." That was all I could manage. Just that one syllable. My fingers were already on the note in my pocket. I could feel its edges pressing into my skin. It was now or never. So I waited until lunch, our usual spot behind the Blockbuster, where the bricks still held a little warmth even in the early afternoon. We sat, legs stretched out, backs against the wall, sharing a bag of barbecue chips and a bottle of Snapple. She told me about her biology class, about how she nearly dropped her frog dissection tray, and I laughed even though I wasn't really listening. My heart was too loud. Then, just when she looked down to open the Snapple, I slipped the note onto her knee. She looked at it, then at me. I didn't say anything. Her fingers moved slowly. She picked up the note like it might break, then unfolded it with care, edge by edge. I watched every move. It felt like I was holding my breath with my whole body. And then she read it. For a moment, her face didn't change. Her eyes just scanned the page, her lashes casting little shadows. Then she looked up at me and smiled. That smile. I'll never forget it. It wasn't huge. It wasn't dramatic. It was soft. It was real. It was hers. "Can I keep this?" she asked. I nodded. My mouth was dry. I couldn't have spoken if I tried. She tucked the note into the small pocket of her jean jacket and leaned her head lightly against my shoulder. Neither of us said anything for a while. We just sat there, letting the silence wrap around us like a blanket. Do you remember when silence meant connection? When no words were still words? I didn't need her to say anything else. Her smile, her eyes, the way she folded the note and kept it close, that was enough. Later, when I got home, I sat on my bed again under those glowing stars and whispered the words one last time. I love you. This time, I didn't need to practice, because I had already said it. Not with my voice, but with ink, paper, and the courage to fold it carefully. Do you see now why a crumpled note could mean more than any digital message? Why a tiny piece of paper held close to the heart could make you feel more seen than 1,000 likes or heart reacts. So, I'll tell you what happened after that. How love in the 90s didn't come with a seen notification. How every response was a mystery you had to wait for. And I'll tell you about the first time she wrote something back. Yes, she wrote back. The note stayed in her jacket pocket for days. I saw it every time she reached for her lip balm or the little notebook where she scribbled things she wanted to remember, like movie quotes or songs from the radio. It was always there, folded, neatly, the corners soft from handling. She never brought it up again, not with words, but the air between us had shifted, like something invisible had settled into place. There was a new calmness in the way she looked at me, and sometimes her hand would rest on mine for no reason at all. We had become quieter together, not awkwardly so, but in that gentle way people fall into when they no longer have to try so hard, when just being near someone feels enough. But the truth was, even after the note, I hadn't actually said it out loud. Those 3 words still lived mostly in my head, like a half-whispered spell. And though she had smiled when she read them, tucked them away like something precious, I wasn't sure if they meant the same coming from my voice. Somehow, saying it aloud felt like walking a tightrope without a net. With the note, I had time to think. I had ink and paper and space. With my voice, it would be raw, immediate. There would be no backspace, just breath and sound and everything. I felt, all tangled up in a single moment. Have you ever said, "I love you," out loud to someone for the very first time? Not in a text, not in a chat, not even in a voicemail. Just you, them, and your pounding heart? It happened on a Wednesday afternoon. School let out early because of teacher conferences, and we walked home the long way, down by the creek that ran behind the neighborhood. The path was overgrown with wildflowers and that sticky weed that clung to your socks. I remember we both wore backpacks even though there was no homework. It just felt wrong to walk home without them. Emma had on her navy hoodie, the one with sleeves too long, and I wore my windbreaker that made that soft swish-swish sound with every step. We talked about nothing and everything. About the smell of the wet leaves. About the way the clouds looked. Like popcorn. About the time I got caught sneaking extra pizza slices in the cafeteria and blamed it on Jake. She laughed, nudging me with her shoulder, and we kept walking until we reached the old stone bridge near the edge of the woods. That's where we stopped. The creek below made a quiet bubbling sound and the air felt still. I don't know why it happened then, or what in that moment pushed me forward, but I knew it was time. I couldn't keep the words inside anymore. They had lived too long in silence. I turned toward her and took a breath. She looked up at me, waiting. My mouth was dry. My hands were sweating inside my sleeves. My throat tightened like it was protecting something. But my heart, it was loud. So loud I swore she could hear it. I opened my mouth, closed it again, took another breath. The words fought their way out of me, 3 little soldiers marching into battle. I love you. There it was. The air didn't move. She blinked. Her lips parted just slightly. And for a second, I thought she hadn't heard me. Or maybe I hadn't actually said it. Maybe it had stayed in my head like all those other times, during all those rehearsals in the mirror, in the shower, under the stars. But no, I had said it. I felt the heat rise to my face. My chest ached like it had been punched from the inside. I could feel my pulse in my neck, in my wrists, everywhere. She didn't speak right away. She just looked at me with those deep, kind eyes. And then she reached out slowly, like every move mattered. Her fingers found mine, laced them together. Then she said it. I love you too. And just like that, the silence broke. Not with noise, not with fanfare, but with the sound of breath we had both been holding. The kind of breath that only comes when something true has been spoken. We stood on that bridge for what felt like a whole season. The wind picked up, tossing a few yellow leaves across the ground, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. But we didn't move. We just held hands and listened to the world around us. There were no confetti cannons, no camera flashes, no applause. Just two teenagers in the 90s, hearts wide open, with nothing between them but truth. Do you remember when words carried weight because they were rare? When there were no shortcuts, no gifs or hearts or animated reactions to do the talking for you? Just your voice, your eyes, and the trembling courage of the moment. That night, I didn't go home right away. I sat on the front steps for a while, listening to my Walkman. I played the same song over and over, Iris by Goo Goo Dolls, because it somehow understood exactly what I was feeling. I looked up at the sky, cloudy now, the stars hidden, and I whispered the words again just for myself. I love you. Not because I had to, not because I needed to practice, but because they were finally mine, spoken, real, returned. In the days that followed, we didn't say it constantly. It didn't become routine. It wasn't something we texted or scribbled, randomly in margins. It stayed special. We said it when it meant something, and we knew that every time we did, we were stepping back into that quiet space on the bridge, that sacred moment when the whole world had paused for us. And that's the thing, isn't it? Saying, I love you out loud for the first time. It's terrifying, but also it's the most human thing we do. It's skin and breath and heart. It's imperfect, it's beautiful, and if you're lucky, the silence that follows says everything you need to hear. And so I'll tell you what came after. How we began using different words to say the same thing. How in the 90s, love wasn't just in the phrase, but in the way someone waited for you after class, or made you a mixtape, or gave you their last piece of gum. Because back then, love was something you felt in gestures. And yes, she made me a mixtape. There's this idea that some moments in life should feel like movies. You know the ones, when the camera pulls back, the music swells, the lighting is just right, and something big happens. A confession, a kiss, a promise. But real life doesn't give you a director or a script. And most of the time, the best moments happen when you least expect them. Not because they're perfect, but because they're true. After that afternoon on the bridge, after I finally said those 3 words and heard them returned, things didn't change in some dramatic, cinematic way. Emma and I didn't suddenly start dancing through hallways or skipping homework to stare into each other's eyes under the bleachers. We still had pop quizzes and chores and curfews, but underneath it all, something had settled, like a melody, that had finally found its harmony. The funny thing about love is that once it's said, it starts to find its own language. It begins to show up in little things, like when she saved the last bite of her chocolate bar for me, even though it was her favorite. Or when I started learning to braid because she once said she liked the way it looked, and I wanted to surprise her. Love became a thread running through the days, not always visible, but always there. But every now and then, life gives you a choice, a doorway, a moment that's not perfect, but waiting to become something more. It happened one Friday in October. The sun had already started to set earlier each day, and the air carried that crisp scent of dry leaves and something sweet, like cinnamon or bonfires. We had stayed late after school because Emma wanted to help paint decorations for the fall dance, even though we weren't planning to go. She said she liked the idea of being part of something colorful, even if she didn't stay for the music. I sat nearby, watching her dip her brush into a jar of orange paint and laugh with the other volunteers. I loved the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was focused, the way she talked with her hands when she was excited. When we left the gym, the sky was already turning pink and gold. "Walk home with me?" she asked, her eyes hopeful, but calm. "Always," I said, and meant it. We didn't talk much at first, just the sound of our steps on the sidewalk, the occasional crunch of a leaf underfoot, and the low hum of faraway cars. The trees above us were glowing in the fading light like they were on fire, but not burning. A dog barked behind a fence, someone was grilling in their backyard, and the smell drifted through the air, warm and smoky. And I knew it was the right moment. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't staged, but it felt full. full of air, full of light, full of us. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out something small, a folded piece of notebook paper. Not a note this time, but a drawing, a sketch I had made a week earlier during math class of the two of us sitting on the bridge, her shoes dangling over the edge and me beside her, looking not at the water, but at her. She took it gently, opened it, stared. "You made this?" she asked softly. I nodded. "Yeah, I know it's not perfect." She smiled, and for a second I saw the kid in her, the one who used to wear mismatched socks and talk to pigeons. "No, it is. It's real." We sat down on the curb under a tree. The sky was deep orange now, with streaks of purple near the horizon. The wind had picked up just enough to carry away the scent of barbecue and replace it with earth and pine. And that's when I said it again. Not, "I love you." This time, it was something else. "I want this to last." She looked at me, blinking, slowly, her expression soft and unreadable. "I don't mean forever," I added quickly. "I know we're young, I know people change, but right now, I just want this. I want more moments like this." She nodded. "Me too." And we sat, there, shoulder to shoulder, as the sky finished setting. There were no fireworks, no music swells, just the comfort of being exactly where we were meant to be, with the person we wanted most to be with. Later that week, on her birthday, I gave her a second drawing. This one was of her bedroom window, half open, with the curtains blowing gently, inward and the moon peeking through. It was based on something she had told me once, that when she couldn't sleep, she'd lie awake and imagine the stars were breathing just for her. She didn't say anything when she opened it, just stared for a long time, then reached out and held my hand tightly, fingers squeezing mine like she was afraid to let go. "You listen better than anyone I know," she whispered. I didn't need to say anything back. The moment had spoken, for us, and that's the truth about choosing the right moment. It's not about the timing being perfect. It's not about the backdrop or the date or how many candles are lit. It's about what's in your chest, about noticing the stillness between words, about trusting that sometimes the most ordinary moments are the ones that carry the most, meaning a walk home, a birthday, a sunset. These were the settings of our love story. Simple, honest, underrated. We never planned the big things. We just followed the little ones, and they always led us back to each other. Some things, once spoken, just stay. They don't float away like vapor. They don't delete with the tap of a button. There were no unsend options in the 90s. No backspace for words already spilled into the air between two people. Back then, if you said something you didn't mean, you had to live with the weight of it. And if you said something true, something raw and trembling, you had to trust the person on the other side to hold it with care. It was both terrifying and beautiful. After the walk home and the drawing by moonlight, things felt softer between me and Emma. More fluid. We were still ourselves, still awkward and unpolished, but there was a new kind of awareness in the way we talked, in the way we sat close without needing excuses. At lunch, I didn't have to wonder if I could sit next to her. I just did. She'd slide her tray beside mine, sometimes stealing my fries without asking, sometimes offering the last bite of her peanut butter and banana sandwich. There was a quiet language between us now, built on glances and inside jokes and the warmth of a shared silence. But then, as it always does, the world crept in. It was a rainy Tuesday in November when I learned that saying something out loud could be as irreversible as carving it into wet cement. Our school had this weird tradition called story swap in English class. Once a semester, we had to write a personal story and read it out loud to a partner. No grading on grammar or structure, just raw experience. Miss Gordon said it helped build trust. I always suspected it just made shy kids sweat through their shirts. That day, we were told to pair up and read what we wrote. Emma turned to me instantly, smiling. I nodded. Of course we'd read to each other. Who else would we choose? I'd written about my dad, about the way he used to fix things around the house and hum off key while doing it, about how quiet the garage had become since he left. It wasn't dramatic, just a memory. I read it to her with steady breath and shaky hands, and when I finished, she didn't speak right away. She just reached out and touched my wrist lightly, grounding me like a paperweight on a windy desk. Then she read her story. It was about a summer vacation to Maine, where she'd gotten stung by a jellyfish and her older brother had carried her back to shore. It was sweet and a little funny. She had this way of writing that made everything feel like a daydream. When she finished, I realized I was smiling so wide my cheeks ached, but then it happened. We were gathering our notebooks, the classroom buzzing, again as partners traded papers or laughed over awkward moments. And without thinking, without filtering, I said it. I think I'm falling in love with you. It wasn't planned. I hadn't practiced it in the mirror like before. I hadn't written it on a note or waited for the right sunset. It just slipped, out, clear as glass in a room filled with chatter and the scent of chalk and pencil shavings. She froze. Not dramatically, not with gasps or wide eyes, just still, like the moment had locked her into place. For a second, I wanted to scoop the words out of the air and shove them back inside my mouth, to rewind the scene, to pretend I hadn't just offered up a piece of my heart like a fragile paper crane, but I couldn't. This wasn't AOL Instant Messenger. There was no delete key hovering in the air. No chance to say, oops, never mind. It was out there now, woven into the fabric of that afternoon. Me, her, and the echo of what I had just said. She blinked. Her lips parted, then closed again. The bell rang. Kids shoved chairs back. Someone threw a wad of paper across the room. The real world rushed in, unaware of the hurricane quietly unfolding at table 6. We didn't speak again until we were walking out of school together, backpacks thudding against our shoulders in sync. "You meant that?" she asked softly, her voice barely rising above the wind. I nodded. I didn't plan to say it. It just came out. She was quiet for a long time. I stared at the sidewalk, counting the cracks, my throat dry and thick. Finally, she said, "I'm glad you did." I looked up. She wasn't smiling. Not exactly. But her eyes held that steady kind of light you only see in people who are listening, with everything they have. "I don't know if I'm there yet," she added, "but I care about you. A lot. And I'm not scared of what you said." Something loosened in my chest. Not because I got the answer I wanted, but because she didn't. Run. She didn't laugh or flinch or pretend she didn't hear. She held my words like a secret passed from hand to hand. We kept walking, not needing to fill the silence. And later that night, as I lay in bed, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars on my ceiling, I thought about what it meant to say something you couldn't take back. That there's a kind of courage in letting your feelings stand unprotected in the open. In trusting the person across from you not to turn them into a joke or a weapon, or something they can throw back at you months later. That night, I didn't wish for a second chance. I didn't want to edit what I'd said, even if it scared me, even if it didn't land like a fairy tale. I had been honest. And in the world we lived in, a world without filters or autocorrect, honesty was a kind of magic. You said it, and it stayed. Like ink in a journal. Like initials, scratched into a tree. Like a mixtape you gave someone with every song carefully chosen, knowing they'd listen all the way through. Waiting can be a cruel kind of silence. Not the peaceful quiet of a library or the stillness of a lake at dusk, but the dense, aching hush that fills your chest when you've handed over something precious and don't know if it will be returned. I had said it. The words were out there. "I think I'm falling in love with you." And even though she hadn't run away or laughed or frozen in horror, even though she had told me she cared a lot, I still felt like I was standing at the edge of something enormous, waiting for gravity to decide what came next. Back then, you couldn't just send a follow-up text to smooth out the edges. You couldn't check for read indicators or obsess over whether someone was online but ignoring you. There was no blue checkmark of comfort, no typing bubbles. You just waited. You sat with your thoughts, your heartbeat, and the hope that your honesty hadn't broken something fragile between you. Emma and I kept walking that day after class, like everything was normal. But it wasn't, at least not to me. Every step home felt heavier, like I was carrying a question that had no answer yet. She didn't say much after her, "I'm glad you did." And while that meant the world in the moment, it wasn't final. It wasn't definitive. It left space. And space, when you're 17 and in love for the first time, is dangerous. It fills with worst-case scenarios. It echoes. That night, I stared at my landline phone for an hour. It sat on the desk in my bedroom, its curly cord tangled like always. I didn't call, neither did she. I kept the radio low and did my homework, but every sentence blurred under the weight of maybe. Maybe she was thinking about me. Maybe she regretted not saying more. Maybe she didn't know how she felt, and that was scarier than a no. The next day, she wasn't at school. I tried to play it cool. Maybe she had a dentist appointment or felt sick or just needed a break. But the truth, I panicked. What if I'd pushed too far? What if she needed space from me? I didn't want to become one of those stories people whispered about in the hallways. The guy who confessed too early and scared the girl away. It wasn't some movie scene where violins played and the camera faded to black after the big line. Real life had pauses, gaps, silence. And in that silence, I started to unravel. During lunch, I sat in our usual spot alone. I picked at my sandwich and laughed along half-heartedly with the guys at the table. But my eyes kept flicking toward the cafeteria doors, hoping, wishing, waiting. Seconds felt like hours. I kept thinking back to what she had said. I care about you. A lot. Not I feel the same. Not I love you too. There was no closure, just a thin thread of maybe holding everything together. When the final bell rang, I went straight home. I didn't stop by the record store like usual. I didn't ride my bike around the block to kill time. I sat in my room and rewound the moment in my head 100 times. The way she looked at me. The way she hadn't smiled but hadn't turned away either. Was that good? Was that a beginning or the start of a gentle letdown? Then, at around 6, the phone rang. I leapt for it, trying not to sound breathless. "Hey," she said. Her voice was soft, almost shy. "Hey, I missed school today," she added as if that weren't already obvious. "Yeah, I noticed." A pause, the kind that stretched across miles. I could hear the low hum of her house in the background, the sound of a television from another room, maybe her mom moving dishes in the kitchen. "I wasn't avoiding you," she said finally. "I didn't think you were," I lied. "I just needed to think." I waited. My hands were cold, even though my room was warm. "You caught me off guard yesterday." "Not in a bad way," she said quickly, like she didn't want me to worry. "Just, I wasn't ready for how much that meant." I said nothing. Let her fill the space. "I've never had anyone say something like that to me," she continued. "Not like that, not in person, not with that look in their eyes." Another pause. I thought about it all night, and all day, and I kept wondering why I didn't just say what I wanted to say yesterday, why I froze up. I held my breath. "Because the truth is," she whispered, "I think I'm falling for you too." It hit me like a wave. No, not a wave. More like that feeling when a favorite song comes on the radio out of nowhere, one you haven't heard in years, and it brings back everything at once. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure she could hear it through the line. "You have no idea what that means to me," I said, and I meant it in the deepest way possible. She laughed, light and nervous. "I think I do. You said it first." And in that moment, the wait was worth it. The silence, the doubt, the overthinking. It all melted into a single second where everything clicked into place. Her words weren't perfect or rehearsed or delivered under a cinematic sky. They were quiet and real and arrived a day late, but they were mine. I didn't need more. I didn't need music or roses or some dramatic speech. I just needed that, her voice in my ear, her truth matching mine, and the beautiful knowledge that even if the world didn't spin the same tomorrow, we had this. Later that week, when we met at the library to study, she reached across the table and held my hand for the first time. No words, no audience, just the warm press of her fingers around mine, the kind of small gesture that meant everything. There's a particular kind of magic in waiting, not the impatient kind, but the one filled with quiet hope, with faith, with the belief that something true doesn't need to rush. We waited, and it came. In her voice, in her courage, in that simple sentence. I think I'm falling for you too. There are moments you want to keep just for yourself, not because you're hiding anything, but because they feel too delicate, too sacred to pass around like a flyer for a school dance. But when something that real happens, something that shakes your world, even in a quiet way, it eventually spills over. You start to glow without meaning to. You walk a little differently, smile at things that wouldn't have made you smile before. And people, especially friends who know your every look, notice. By Friday, I couldn't hold it in anymore. It started with Jay. He caught me leaning against my locker between classes, earbuds in, listening to a mixtape I'd made months ago that suddenly felt brand new again. He raised an eyebrow, smirked in that way only a best friend can, and said, "Okay, spill it." I tried to play dumb. Spill what? He wasn't buying it. You've been walking around like you won the lottery and haven't told anyone. Don't make me guess. Is it Emma? That name, out loud, still sent a current through me. I hesitated, but the grin broke through anyway. I nodded, looking down at my shoes like I was confessing something sacred. Jay whooped, loud enough for a few heads to turn. I knew it. I knew it. Man, finally. Keep it down, I laughed, shoving him lightly. But it was no use. He wouldn't let up. Tell me everything. Don't skip. I want the whole thing. What did you say? What did she say? Did you kiss? Wait. Don't tell me if you kissed. No. Tell me. Wait. Did you? We didn't kiss. Not yet. But the way he asked, the excitement in his voice, it reminded me how rare these moments were. These firsts. Not the ones you brag about to seem cool, but the ones you share like stories around a campfire, full of heat and wonder and disbelief. So we skipped lunch and sat behind the gym, where no one really went anymore. And I told him how we walked home after class, how I said it, those exact words, how she looked at me, didn't answer right away, and how the silence almost broke me. I told him about the phone call the next day, the sound of her voice on the other end, the way she whispered the words back, not like she was unsure, but like she wanted to protect them as much as I did. Jay listened without interrupting, which for him was rare. His eyes lit up, and even though he joked, because that was his way, I could tell he was genuinely happy. "Man, that's like something out of one of those cheesy romance movies my sister watches," he said. "But I'm not even mad about it. That's solid. That's real." Later that afternoon, I found myself telling Mia, too. She was the only girl in our circle who truly understood Emma, and she always saw through people's nonsense. When I told her, she didn't scream or freak out like I expected. She just smiled and said, "Took her long enough?" "What do you mean?" "She's liked you forever," Mia replied. "She just didn't know if you were serious." Hearing, that hit differently. It was one thing to feel it, another to have it confirmed. Like all those glances, those late-night conversations about music and fear and the future had always been building towards something we both wanted. We'd just been too careful to name it. That weekend, we hung out at the old video rental place where everyone used to go even if they didn't plan to rent anything. Emma met up with me there, and when our friends saw us walking in side by side, close but not quite holding hands, their expressions said it all. There were smiles, questions, teasing, but no one was mean. No one made it weird. It felt like they had all been waiting too, waiting for us to finally figure it out. As the night wore on, I found myself retelling the story a third time, this time to the whole group, sitting on the floor of someone's basement, pizza boxes. Around us, a VHS tape paused on the screen. I recounted it not like I was trying to impress them, but like I was reliving it with every word. I mimicked her expression the way she said, "I think I'm falling for you too." And for a second, the room got quiet, like they all knew the weight of what I was describing. Then someone cracked a joke and laughter bubbled up, and it became just another memory stacked on top of so many shared ones. But it wasn't just another memory to me. It was the one that would stay sharp when others faded. The one that would play in my mind years from now when I'd hear a familiar song or smell a certain kind of rain. It would come back with the same intensity, not because it was dramatic or wild, but because it was mine. Ours. And telling it, face to face without filters or edits, made it feel even more real. Every time I spoke it aloud, it stitched itself a little deeper into who I was becoming, into who we were becoming. Back then, stories weren't shared in stories. There were no likes, no hashtags, no DMs, just words, spoken, face to face. You watched someone's reaction. You heard their laughter or felt their silence. And when they leaned in or smiled or said, "No way," it mattered more than any emoji ever could. That weekend, as we walked home again, Emma nudged me with her shoulder and said, "So, did you tell them?" I laughed. "Of course. You're kind of impossible to keep secret." She rolled her eyes but smiled. "And? They're happy for us." She looked ahead, quiet for a moment, then said softly, "Good. I want this to be something we don't have to hide." And that was the moment. Not when I told her I loved her. Not even when she said it back. But right then, when we both agreed that this was real and we were ready to share it with the world, one friend at a time. The days after telling our friends felt easier in some ways, but quieter in others. Something about saying it out loud, not just to her, but to people who mattered, made everything more real. It was out there now. No edits, no takebacks, no dreaming. It was just in my head. But with that honesty came a creeping thought I hadn't let myself feel before. What if I'd moved too fast? She said she was falling. Not that she was there yet. Not "I love you too." Not exactly. And even though those words had meant the world to me, "I think I'm falling for you too," there was still a space between falling and landing. And in that space, fear liked to creep in. It came late at night mostly. When the house was quiet, the tape player hissed between tracks and I stared at the ceiling trying to replay everything exactly as it happened. I'd catch myself wondering if I should have waited. Maybe let her say it first. Maybe not said it at all. But love doesn't work on logic. It doesn't follow scripts. You feel it, and then one day, without meaning to, you say it. And after that, it's out of your hands. I kept thinking about how her face had shifted right after I said it. Not in a bad way, not scared or disappointed, but there had been a pause. A stillness. She'd looked at me like she was trying to see the future in my eyes, like she needed to match her next words to the weight of what I had just handed her. That pause lived in my chest for days. Even though she called, even though she still smiled, when she saw me and leaned in close when we walked side by side. There was something underneath it all, or maybe just in my head, that made me second-guess what I'd done. Because telling someone you loved them, really telling them, means more than just hoping they feel the same. It means showing them who you are without armor, and hoping they won't walk away. Jay noticed. Of course he did. He had a radar for when I was off. We were hanging out in his garage, skipping rocks into a bucket and talking about nothing in particular, when he suddenly said, "You're in your head again." "I'm fine," I said too quickly. "No, you're not. You're doing that thing where you stare off like you're in a movie montage." I sighed and dropped the rock. What if I messed it up? You didn't. But what if I said it too soon? What if she's not ready and now I just made everything weird? He looked at me for a second, then sat on the edge of the workbench. "Dude, you said what you felt. That's not messing it up. That's being honest. And if she wasn't ready, she would have told you. Or she'd be distant. But she's not. She's still here. Still here." Those words hit harder than he meant them to. Because, yeah, she was still here. Still laughing at my dumb impressions. Still picking the strawberry candies out of her bag and giving them to me because she knew I liked them best. Still waiting, outside the classroom just to walk with me to lunch. But still, part of me kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. I guess that's what fear does. It whispers that maybe you were too much. Maybe you loved too loudly. Too soon. And then came Tuesday. We're walking home from school, like always. It had rained that morning, and the sidewalks were still damp. The air smelled like wet cement and wildflowers, and the clouds moved slow overhead. She was talking about something her older sister said, something ridiculous, and I was half listening, half lost in the rhythm of her voice. That's when she stopped. I turned to look at her. "What?" I asked. She smiled, soft and a little nervous. "I've been thinking about what you said the other day." My heart punched my ribs. "Yeah," she nodded. I didn't say it back. Not really. "You didn't have to, I know, but I want to." And then, without fanfare, without dramatic music or a crowd watching, she looked at me and said, "I love you." Just like that. No warning. No pause this time. No overthinking. And I swear, everything else disappeared. The street, the cars, the noise of the world. It was just her. Her eyes, her voice, her hands fidgeting with the strap of her bag. And me, frozen in the best possible way. I didn't say anything at first. I just took a breath and smiled. Because in that moment, I realized it had all been worth it. Every second of doubt, every sleepless night, every loop my mind ran. Because when you take that leap, not knowing if someone's going to catch you, and then they do, there's no feeling like it. We kept walking. She slipped her hand into mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. And in that silence, that real, soft, beautiful silence, I felt safer than I ever had before. Later that night, lying on my bed, cassette spinning beside me, I thought about what it really means to risk saying something first. To stand at the edge and leap without knowing where you'll land. It's terrifying. But love isn't supposed to be safe. It's supposed to be real. And sometimes real means vulnerable. And yet, I'd do it again. 100 times over. Because hearing her say it back, in her own time, in her own voice, meant more than any perfect reply in the moment ever could. It was truth. It was her. And it was mine to hold forever. It wasn't just that she said it. It was how she said it. The quiet steadiness in her voice, the way her eyes didn't waver, the slight shake in her fingers as they brushed against mine, like the words were still reverberating inside her even after they left her lips. And me, standing there, feeling them settle into the air between us like dust catching sunlight, knew I would never forget that moment. Not the sound, not the temperature, not the color of the clouds as they rolled across the sky like time slowing, just for us. I love you. 3 words. Simple, short, universal. But when she said them, they felt ancient. Like they carried all the weight of every moment we had shared and every moment we had yet to live. It wasn't just a confession. It was a stamp on the timeline of our lives. a mark that couldn't be undone. That night, I kept hearing her voice in my mind, not as an echo, not like a replay, but like a presence. Her words lingered the way music does after you take off your headphones, still vibrating somewhere under your skin. I lay there, the soft hum of the ceiling fan circling above me, and stared at the ceiling as if it might spell out the next chapter for us. For a long time, I didn't want to move. I didn't want to fall asleep and risk forgetting how it felt. That exact second she said it, how time stilled, how her voice trembled just slightly, like she knew the gravity of what she was handing me. Because love, when it's real, doesn't come wrapped in perfection. It comes in vulnerability, in shared silence, in trust deeper than we can explain. I didn't tell anyone, not Jay, not even my sister. I kept it inside like something sacred, not because I was hiding it, but because I was holding it, like a delicate glass sculpture, not fragile from weakness, but from the care it took to craft. It was mine, ours, and some things, when fresh, need space to breathe before they're passed around. The next day, we didn't talk about it right away. We met at our usual spot by the bike rack, her hair slightly damp from the morning dew, and we just smiled. No need for fireworks, no declarations, just an understanding, a shift in orbit. She walked a little closer. Our hands found each other, like magnets. And in that stillness, I felt everything. In English class, we were asked to read a poem out loud. The teacher picked something old and dusty from an anthology, but one line stuck with me all day. Words are houses, built for memory. I wrote it down in the corner of my notebook and stared at it until the letters blurred. I thought about how her "I love you" had built something inside me, something new, something lasting. Because it wasn't just that she loved me, it was that she said it. She let the words out, gave them breath, let them live in the open. That takes guts. It's easy to love quietly, in your own head, in the safety of daydreams and silent hope. But to say it out loud, to give it shape and let it stand under the light, that's brave. That's beautiful. I think that's why those words carried so much weight, because once they're out there, they can't be pulled back. They become part of your story. They attach themselves to moments, to places, to smells, to songs. Suddenly, "I love you" isn't just a thing you said, it's a timestamp, a soul print. For the rest of the week, everything felt different. Not louder or brighter, just more real, more present. Even the ordinary things became pieces of the whole. Passing her a pencil in class felt significant. Sitting beside her, during lunch, our knees brushing under the table, became a silent sentence. When she laughed, I didn't just hear it. I felt it, like it was echoing inside the part of me that had been waiting for this all along. I started noticing new things about her. Not because she had changed, but because now I was looking closer. The way she bit her lip when she was thinking. The way she tilted her head when she listened. How her handwriting curled slightly at the ends of her words. Every little thing felt like a thread in the larger tapestry I was lucky enough to witness unfolding. And me. I felt different too. Not just happier, lighter, but also heavier in a strange, good way. Like carrying something precious. Her love was not a feather, but it wasn't a burden either. It was a presence, a quiet flame. And I wanted to protect it, to honor it, to keep it burning without smothering it. I realized that love wasn't about making grand gestures or having all the answers. It was about showing up, every day, with honesty, with care. Friday after school, we sat under the big tree near the field. The sun was setting, and the light poured through the branches in golden streaks. She leaned against me, resting her head on my shoulder, and I could feel her breathing. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The silence had changed now. It wasn't nervous or unsure. It was full. It said everything. I remember thinking, this is it. This is what they meant in every song, every book, every late-night conversation I never understood until now. This feeling. Not butterflies, not fireworks, but the quiet knowing that you are seen, and that seeing someone back is the most sacred thing you can do. Later, she whispered it again, just once, just quietly enough that only I could hear. I love you. I didn't reply right away. I didn't have to. She knew. I squeezed her hand, kissed her forehead, and sat still as the sky turned a deeper blue. The words hung in the air, soft and sure, and I let them settle into my bones like a lullaby. Years have passed since that evening under the big tree when she whispered those words. The words that changed everything for me. The words that seemed to stretch time itself and hold me in a moment so vivid I can still hear her voice as if it were yesterday. I remember it all, word for word, like a secret tucked away in the folds of my memory. Because when you said, "I love you" in the 90s, it was more than just words. It was a promise, a leap, a truth. It was for real, and it stayed with you. I wonder sometimes why those words carried so much weight back then. Before texts, before instant messages, before emojis made it easy to say things without really saying them. Why did it feel so terrifying and so beautiful to say those 3 words out loud? Maybe it was because once spoken, there was no undo button, no way to erase them or take them back. It was just you, standing there with your heart open, vulnerable, brave. The silence afterward was a world of its own, full of possibility, fear, hope. When I think back to that moment, I remember how my hands trembled slightly as she looked at me with that quiet certainty in her eyes. I remember the taste of the late summer air, thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and the faint sweetness of honeysuckle from the vines growing by the fence. The light was soft, like it was trying not to disturb us, bathing everything in. A gentle golden glow that made the world feel like it belonged to us alone. I remember every word. The way she said it, almost like a secret she was sharing only with me, even though the world around us was wide and loud and full of people who would never understand what those words meant. I love you. Simple. Honest. True. And in that moment, everything else, all the noise, the fear, the uncertainty, fell away. It was just us and those words. Back then, there was no rush, no pressure to respond right away, no notifications buzzing to break the moment. Just a look, a breath, a heartbeat shared in silence. We learned to listen to the spaces between words, to the quiet sounds of hope and longing, to the shy smiles that said more than any message ever could. Saying, "I love you" was like opening a door into something new, something fragile and precious that needed to be handled with care. Do you remember what it felt like the first time you heard those words? How the world seemed to tilt a little. How you suddenly saw the person in a new light, as if a secret window had been opened, letting sunlight flood into a room you didn't even know was dark. I do. It was like discovering a hidden part of the sky, one filled with stars just waiting to be named. And the waiting. Oh, the waiting was always the hardest part. Waiting for the other person to say it back, to mean it, to hold that same truth in their heart. But waiting wasn't filled with impatience. It was filled with wonder, with the quiet thrill of possibility that stretched out before us like a long road waiting to be traveled, step by step, hand in hand. I think what made those words so lasting was that they were never taken lightly. To say, "I love you," was to open yourself fully and completely, without hiding behind screens or shortcuts. It was a leap into the unknown, a brave surrender to something bigger than ourselves. And once said, those words became part of you, a thread woven into the fabric of your life, forever reminding you of who you were and who you loved. Sometimes I find myself whispering those words to the wind, as if sending them back through time to that young person standing under the tree, nervous and hopeful, hands sweaty, heart pounding. I want to tell them that it's okay to be scared, that those words are worth the risk, because when love is real, it leaves a mark that no time can erase. We didn't have emojis to soften the blow or gifts to lighten the mood. We had only our voices, our hearts, and the weight of those words hanging in the air, solid and undeniable. And that made them beautiful. That made them unforgettable. Because love in the 90s wasn't just a feeling. It was a moment, a memory, a promise kept in the quiet spaces of everyday life. Looking back now, I realize that the magic wasn't just in saying, "I love you," for the first time. The magic was in living those words afterward. In every smile shared, every hand held, every silent glance that said, "I'm here, I'm yours." Those words built a world that we could return to whenever we needed it, no matter where life took us. So, if you ever wonder what it was like to say, "I love you," before the digital age, before the instant replies and the endless scrolling, I hope you find a little piece of that moment here. The moment when words meant everything because they were all you had. When saying "I love you" was a brave act of trust and hope. When those words were not just spoken, but lived. Day by day, breath by breath, heart by heart. And maybe, just maybe, that is why I still carry that memory with me. Because some things once said become part of who we are. They shape us, hold us, remind us that we are capable of great love. That, in a world moving faster and faster, some moments are worth slowing down for. Some words are worth holding on to forever. Thank you for walking down this nostalgic path with me, for remembering the weight and beauty of those words, and for feeling with me the courage it took to say them for the first time. May we never forget the power of simple, true love, spoken without shortcuts.